yeah, it's different material, and it started from 5 now. We don't have a countdown from 6 anymore.
Oh my
It's
God, I feel
finished.
1 secondly uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's completely different now. I'm lost as well. I don't know what to do.
So this happens a lot though, Martin, and I think it's a good sign, right? So Eric Youngstrom, who's joining us tonight, he's the founder and CEO of Onramp Funds. Like the first thing I notice about Eric, except for the unbelievably cool Texas flag in the background, is he's got the killer, and the thumbs up, of course, is he's got the killer microphone.
Yeah.
How do you think he sounds?
I think it sounds amazing. How are you, Eric?
Well, I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy the mic's taking care of things.
Oh my God,
It
he
does.
sounds like he's on the radio.
Super good.
What are we going to do? So, Eric, it's nice to have you here. We already said the founder and the CEO at Onramp Funds. There's a lot to talk about there as well. But before we do that, can you give us some of, besides the Texas thing, which what people will see pretty obviously, can you give us a little bit of your background just for some context?
Sure. Yeah, I'm the, as you said, I'm the CEO and founder of Onramp Funds. I'm honored to be here today. Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
You're welcome.
I've been in Texas about 25 years. Actually, wasn't born here, but I have ancestors who fought for independence, the Battle of San Jacinto. So I have deep Texas roots.
Oh wow.
I've been in software now for about 20 years, mostly in startups. A little stint at an acquirer in my last startup called Shipping Easy. We provided a suite of fulfillment solutions for the small e-commerce business owner who needed to convert those digital orders into an analog set of processes and then get that product in the box and off to a carrier so it could be delivered anywhere in the world it needed to go to get to that customer.
So
and then
cool.
Bought by Stamps and spent a few years at Stamps, and then really saw the opportunity to start Onramp and was excited to do so. And here we are, kind of a year and a half later, and into our journey, and about 30 people and a couple hundred customers, and just trying to build a better solution for our small business clients.
Did you work at Dell as well?
I did. Back in the mid 90s, before I went to grad school.
Okay.
I was a liberal arts undergrad, and I talked my way into Dell to build out their network interface card testing lab. No tech experience whatsoever, but I got to build a really cool lab with token ring and Ethernet and all of these different protocols, and about 1,600 different computers hooked up to different servers so that you could really just pound the hell out of those things. It was a lot of fun.
Was that your first time working in Texas?
That was my first time working in Texas. Well, I did catering in college.
Yeah, but that's okay. I washed dishes in college, and to be fair, probably the best job I've ever had and the most skilled I ever was, to be fair. So fair enough. I'm really curious.
I had a blast doing it.
I'm really curious about this, and I don't even know how long you were at Dell, but there was before Dell Computer, Austin was always a super cool place, right? But Michael Dell kind of put it on the map, at least in my life. And I can't believe I'm more than 15 years older than you are, maybe more. I don't know, but you know what I mean? What was it like back then? Being a Dell and even doing the stuff you were doing was super cool. Did you feel back then like you were part of something that was amazing, or was it just like a job?
It was really cool. A couple of things about it. One, I was employee somewhere between 14 and 15,000. I can't remember, but my badge number started with a 14. Funny side note, my office, if you've ever seen Office Space, I was in the same office park as Initech. Literally. So when I see that movie, it certainly resonates with me. The team was fantastic. Everybody was trying to accomplish really cool things. It was a year or two after Michael Dell had really blown up on the, kind of first iteration of the laptop. Yep. And I think he borrowed a truck and run over one to tell the team just how disappointed he was. But then they were really pushing out fantastic product. When I left in 98 to go to grad school, a lot of people looked at me like I was crazy to leave because of options.
I mean, Dell was a thing, right? I mean,
it was crazy to leave. But at the same time, I knew that's what I wanted to do, is to go get my MBA and just get more professional. And in kind of hindsight, it was maybe I left a few years early, but in 2000 when the collapse happened, I had friends that were married that were both at Dell that both got laid off.
Yep.
And so, there was also kind of nuclear winter here in Austin in the whole tech scene. So I think in the long run, it worked out really, really well for me. But certainly, look, loved working there, and the people were fantastic, and there was a great energy and all kinds of cool things happening. So, zero complaints, and it certainly helped me launch a career here in Austin.
I want to do a little bit more Texas work, right? Because I had a partnership a few years ago with UT Austin.
Okay.
Right, the University of Texas at Austin, which has really a pretty incredible business school. I mean, tell me if you think I'm wrong, right? But it's a pretty incredible business school there. And I just want people to understand a little bit more about like the growth of University of Texas at Austin. The Texas system itself is pretty amazing, but the Austin campus is really great. And the business school has turned out to be pretty amazing as well. Can you talk about that experience a little bit too? And then I want to get further into the future to Stamps.
Sure. Yeah, so I came to Texas to go to the business school.
Yeah.
I spent a year working at Dell. The other part of that was getting my in-state tuition because it made a huge difference and saved me a ton of money. The campus back then was different, right? They've done massive remodeling and moved the business school a couple buildings over and things like that since then. But what they have built is fantastic now. It was a wonderful experience, a great program. I was there when, McCombs came in and donated all that money and they renamed it. I can't say enough great things about it. It's what brought me to Austin. And honestly, when I finished, I never left. I stayed here. So I've been here 25 years now, which, makes me more of a local than most, but there are still a few unicorns I keep meeting who are born and raised. So they're harder and harder to come by though.
They are. What an incredible experience. When you were at Shipping Easy and you went through the acquisition of Stamps, right? Stamps, I think, is and you didn't even call it stamps.com. You just called it Stamps. And the presumption there is that everybody, but it's interesting, right? Because it's a company overseas and a lot of our listeners, we've got a really global audience, right? So they'll hear Stamps. They'll be like, what is that? So I wanted to just say it explicitly, but stamps.com is, again, also a pretty incredible company. Trying to solve a problem that felt like it was really straightforward. Like, why do I need that in my house? Like, well, I don't understand kind of thing. But once you have it and use it, people swear by it. And they acquired the company where you were working. Is that right? Shipping Easy?
That's
right.
What
was that like going through the acquisition? Like, what did you learn about getting acquired?
We went through an acquisition process that ran about 6 months. We had a number of people. Stamps actually came in at the very end and won at the end. It was, the due diligence process is incredibly difficult, right? So what was really interesting was how quickly the Stamps team could move as opposed to some of the other guys. The flip side to that, right, is that because we've been going through the process, our data rooms were in order, right? All of our documentation was already buttoned up. So we had a really clean set of tools that we could hand over to stamps.com. So those guys could go dig and do their due diligence. The other great thing is, before us, they had acquired a company called Indicia, and Indicia is a, big competitor of theirs in the space. And we were actually partners with Indicia. And so we also came in with tremendous credibility because the Indicia leadership team was still on board.
Nice.
And had moved into leadership positions within the broader Stamps portfolio. And so with that, they really also were able to help vet us and vouch for us and whatnot and bring us into the fold. I think we weren't the last of their acquisition spree, right? They acquired Metapack out of the UK after that. And then after Metapack, right, I guess we went quiet on acquisitions for several years. I actually helped run that acquisition team and as well as global BD. And then I left in 2020, and then, in 2021, I guess October of 2021, the Thoma Bravo private equity guys took them private. I think it was the largest kind of markup on a public share ever. I could be wrong on that, but that was my understanding when they went private back in October. So now they're, doing a roll up and trying to go build kind of a back office play, it looks like to me, in terms of, really powering the back office e-commerce ecosystem.
Yeah, because it's so much more complex. I mean, people don't understand just how complex the logistics side, the picking, the packing, the warehouse management, all the ERP stuff and everything that goes into, here's my product, it needs to go over there. And everything that happens in the middle is just so non-trivial. That back office stuff is super important, no?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, we had customers that would call us and tell us, the one I remember most vividly about a year in was a pastor, and he would make his own organic deodorant at home. And he called us one day because we actually had a support line in Austin, next to all the exec desks.
Right.
and told us like, look, I quit my job because of you guys, right? Most pastors have a full-time job and then they preach, and he was able to quit his full-time job and, really dedicate his life, to just preaching and then running his organic deodorant line, because we actually helped him be more efficient. And if you kind of think about 2012, 2013, right? If you were selling on Amazon and Shopify, you were downloading a CSV file of orders, manipulating that file to then load it into a, UPS or FedEx or kind of poor postal program, generating labels, right? And then aligning the tracking ID back to the order, and then breaking that CSV up and then trying to upload it back to Amazon and Shopify. And God help you if you transposed an order ID, because all of a sudden then none of your tracking details were right. And so just the data process was kind of a 4-hour a day thing. And when our software and ShipStation and then ShipWorks, other competitors came along, all of that kind of just manual work went away, and they really could focus on just running their business.
Let me give you an equivalency for people that listen to the show a lot as well and know my background. I worked on a portfolio trading desk at Goldman Sachs.
Okay.
And we used to literally type in orders, B for buy, S for sell, 100 for 100 shares, and then the Japanese stock code. You're laughing, but we would do it. And then we kind of built our own internal system, which we called SMTM, which stood for Show Me the Money. And they would feel free to laugh. It was funny to us. And then, they would send us orders. It would come sort of done, but then the whole financial service industry just standardized on this thing called fixed protocol. And it basically gave a tag and a field for everything. And this is essentially some of the help that you were doing as well.
Yep.
At Shipping Easy. We would just get a digital file. We'd never see it. It would just get parsed and it would pop into our trading system. And it saved hours of work, not just on the way in, but on the way out as well.
Right.
And we went from being able to trade, let's say $200 million a day to like $2 billion a day with no extra effort.
Right.
And just the change in the scope of that business is the same, right? Same thing. So the pastor got to quit his day job and become a pastor and a deodorant salesperson, as opposed to just like a person who's like doing data entry all day. And that stuff really matters. Yeah.
It does. It does. It makes a world of difference. Now, on the fulfillment side, it doesn't take away the physical steps. You still have to go into your garage or into your warehouse, right, and find the product, get it to a packing desk, and all that sort of stuff. But at least now, you can go hire a team of people to do that. But what you're not doing is manipulating data. Now the data is clean, coming from Amazon, going back to Amazon. They're satisfied because things are working in a timely manner, and they're informed, right? What everybody wants is the data visibility so that expectations are set and met and delivered upon. And if something's going to break in that the communication's solid around it so that the consumer's happy.
Yeah, and those guys are not out there using NetSuite either, right? So they need any kind of help on the technology side that they can possibly get. What was the impetus for starting OnRamp? I mean, you've been kind of not on the fringes, but you've been like in the e-commerce. I'm just, drawing a circle around the center. If e-commerce is in the center, you've been around this like for 20 years, it feels like, right?
I always wanted to start my own business since I was a kid. And prior to OnRamp, I had several experiences where I was kind of like one of either the first employee hired by the founders or kind of one of the first 5 or 6 coming into a company and then building it. And, I really viewed that as kind of my apprenticeship to learn kind of the early stage of things. And so post acquisition, I was ready to go leave and go do another startup, and was really kind of circling around a number of ideas. The opportunity to work for Stamps came up in a different role, and I decided it was, for some family reasons, it was the right thing to do for a few years. And so I did that, and those guys were great, and I have nothing but immense respect for them. But then, kind of after 3 or 4 years, I was looking around, and one of the things that I loved about Shipping Easy was, working with the e-commerce merchant. We get to help the SMB. We get to help the little guy, right? And Americans love the underdog and that kind of thing. And then I'm a huge student of history, and have studied kind of the evolution of freedom and independence going back to the Greek Dark Ages prior to the city states. And what you can see, right, is that the more independent small business owners, the more people who are able to independently generate their own income, the freer and safer and healthier society is. And that's not just for a country, right? That's for a world. And so I wanted to continue working with this customer segment because I think they're worthy of my time. And then what I'd seen at Stamps and at Shipping Easy was, unbeknownst to most people, postage is currency under federal law. So you have to pre-fund a postage balance because there's no such thing as a postpaid postage balance. And so we saw people struggle with cash flow, right? Just that, they were playing the game that most Americans do that are starting an early company is, using credit cards, and one's maxed out. So they go to the next, they're trying to figure out which one to pay, which one not. And it just seemed to me that in an e-commerce business where we have all this massive data visibility, that the ability to go essentially power that kind of sales turnover, the cash flow that's just captured in that segment of the accounting statement, that turns over every kind of 15 to 120 days, was very, very low risk. Wasn't an investment, right? It's not that I'm trying to be a VC with these guys. I'm just trying to go provide them the working capital that they need so they can extract their own cash out of it and go put that money to more valuable, potentially higher risk uses, right? And growing their business, but that they actually have that. More importantly, for a lot of these guys, that is the profit of the business is captured in that turnover cycle. So from an accounting statement perspective, they could be running $1 million in sales and a 10% profit margin. But from a cash flow perspective, that 10%, that 100,000 can't be extracted. And so then they can't even pay themselves. And so what I wanted to do is say, hey, look, we're going to free up your capital. If you want to pay yourself a salary, you can now. If you want to put all that back into the business and grow faster, you can choose to do that. But what we're here to do is really help that merchant find, cash flow sustainability.
What was it like for you? Because I think about this myself. I said earlier, like I've got to be 10 or 15 years older than you are, right? And when most people, and they're wrong, but when most people think about startup founders, and in a way, you are a startup founder, right? You're running your own company. Mm-hmm. They think of, a 27-year-old girl who's, just graduated from business school and wants to make Spanx or some kind of thing. Like this is the idea that most people have in their head. There's very little risk for them because they don't have families. They don't have other responsibilities. They're probably not sending their parents money every month. But you're not that person. And you said, you decided to stay at Stamps a little bit longer for family reasons. So we know you have a family. It's none of our business what that was. But what is it like venturing out on your own at this age? Do you know what I mean? Because you know the cash flow problems. You watch it. That's your job. You're on the other side now. But were you concerned as well, thinking like, oh God, I hope this works kind of thing? Do you know what
I mean? Absolutely. So yes, I have a wife. I have 2 kids that are teenagers. I'm 50. I don't know how old you are, Michael, but I'm 50 years old.
Actually this year, but yeah.
102. You look great.
900. Actually, I'm 57, but go ahead.
Okay. So you got a few years on me. I was blessed to have a couple exits. So, with the Shipping Easy exit, another company that I was the first employee hired by the 4 founders in the identity theft industry. I spent about 6 years with CS Identity before going to Shipping Easy. And I left when they were about 40 million in revenue. They got into a really stable place. And so I went back to kind of do day one again. But both of those companies exited within a month of each other. So I was blessed to get some nice cash, deposits coming in and topping up the balance sheet. And then blessed to have a wife that wanted to support me in pursuing this, right? She's known that I've always wanted to do this, right? Yeah. And I have viewed all of these different companies as places to go learn how to do this. Now, I can tell you, being the founder, it's different than being the guy sitting next to the founder. So I've helped raise money before and I've seen it done, but the stress level is not the same when it's yours versus you're the guy next to the guy or gal. And so it's a different experience. I've put a ton of my own money, not just time, but my own cash into getting this off the ground. And then I am blessed. The team here, we're about 30 people now. Half of us are ex Shipping Easy ShipStation. And so we've actually worked together now for a decade, just not at OnRamp because it's only been around for a year. And so what we have, right, is a real solid team of people with a tremendous amount of trust who've been in the trenches, right, from the early stages through an exit together. So we know what it takes. And, we know each other's foibles and idiosyncrasies and, know how to work for it, know how to recognize when people are stressed, but also, forgive when somebody has their blow up, right? Because we've just seen it and been there and we know that we all come good on the other side. So in that regard, right, being being an on-ramp is a lot of it is with a lot of people you have immense trust and respect for because you've been working together for so long.
I understand. Can you run me through this process? I really want to know how this works, right? So let's say I'm running an e-commerce business. I'm doing okay, right? But you're right. Like the way that I get paid and the way that I have to make payments, there's probably some mismatch on my balance sheet and my income statement, and I can't extract the profit. So not even just to pay myself, but maybe to pay my suppliers, right? So I have cash flow issues.
Correct.
So I come to you and I think like, I'm growing fast enough. I know that I'm actually earning a profit, but I don't have access to it, right? So I want to apply. So I apply to you, and let's say I need 200 grand. I'm just making up a number. I don't even know why I picked that. It just feels like it's not that much money, but it's more than 25 grand. Yeah.
Right.
What are the upfront costs? Let's say you say yes, not you, but let's say OnRamp says yes. So I get to, and I'm borrowing money. Yeah. You're not investing in my business. I'm just borrowing money from you. Do I get 200 free and clear? Do I pay a fee on that? Like how's that fee structure determined?
Sure. Yeah. So what you do to request cash from OnRamp is you got to come sign up. You're going to connect your Amazon, Shopify, BigCommerce, WooCommerce, right? Wherever you sell online. And what we're going to do then is ingest your historic sales data, right? Which gives us a tremendous amount of detail around the performance of your business and the performance of the products in your product catalog and kind of how those sales have evolved over time.
Yep.
And we're going to build a forecast. We're building a forward-looking forecast off of that data. We're also having you connect your bank, and so we can look at your banking transactions. This helps us validate that the Amazon sales are converting to deposits. Right. We need to make sure that's happening. Same with Shopify and whatnot. It's we use that then to make an offer. So let's just say we make that $200,000 offer. Right. We look at working capital as a necessary expense in the business, but there's a percentage, right? We're not going to loan, depending on the channel, more than, I'd say we probably cap between 40 and 50% of your whatever period of revenue we're underwriting against, call it 90 days. So now typically we actually loan about somewhere between 15 and 20% of your 90-day revenue. So in your example, that'd be $1 million and $1 million expected revenue for the next 90 days. We're going to loan you 200,000. And then we charge a small percentage of that top line revenue as the fee. So we are not interest bearing. We are not necessarily the most low cost source of capital, but then we're also not loaning to, merchants that are, $50 million businesses with CFOs with tight accounting standards, right? That are dialed in that banks can loan to. But one of the things we like about our model is from a regulatory perspective, one of the concerns about cash advances, right, is that the fee is charged and collected up front, regardless of the repayment timing. Whereas our fee is charged as you sell. And so if you sell more quickly or if you opt to pay down more quickly, you can actually reduce the fee as a percentage of sales because you're reducing the principal balance, which then gives us a kind of fee-based approach that mimics more the traits of interest, right? Where the less time the money's outstanding, the less expense there is, which feels like a fair thing, right? Because it reduces our risk if the merchant pays back faster.
Why do we care, right? Because you're not the only provider of this service, but why do we care that there's no interest, right? Because at some point, if I've borrowed money over a term and I have to make monthly payments, like I can do the algebra, right? It's not interest per se. Is there some regulatory reason, some contractual reason, some other reason why we don't want to call this interest, or is it just marketing? Do you know what I mean? I'm curious.
Actually, I think it's really about trying to align the expense with how the business owner thinks about running their business. Most business owners think about their financial statements and their performance in terms of percentage, right? So I know that my gross margin is 50%. And I know that my net margin is 10%. Yep. And so if somebody comes to me and says, hey, I want to borrow 20% of my top line. And I say to them, great, I'm going to do that. And here's let's just make it simple, a 1% of top line fee. Well, great. I'm going to get 20% of my top line. And for that, I'm now going to be able to extract out, instead of 10% profit, 9, because I've given up 1% of that, right, that top line in fees. But now I have that $90,000 in my pocket, whereas before it was completely trapped in my inventory turnover cycle. And so the way we structured that, the reason we structure that is to really make it simple for the merchant to evaluate, is that a fair trade? Is the cost that I'm being imposed upon really reflective of the value I can get out of that money? And the challenge with interest is, unless you can get to an interest rate that becomes essentially easy to calculate monthly, let's just say, hey, if we could charge 12% interest, that's 1% a month.
Yep.
But if I have to charge 17% interest, well, okay, what is that? Right now you're doing all this mental gymnastics, and it's really hard to know where you're going to end up. So what we did was really kind of evaluate what was the pricing we would have to charge based on our cost of capital, and then how do we structure that in a way that becomes really, really simple for the merchant to evaluate and say, $200,000, I'm going to pay, in our example, right, 1% of that million. Yep. It's going to cost me $10,000 for 90 days to 6 months. And I don't have to go spend hours with a bank and wait 60 days and fill out 400 pieces of paper to be told no, by the way. I can go to OnRamp and in 2 minutes connect my store, and 30 seconds connect a bank. Within an hour, I have an answer. Wow. But the same day or next day I have cash.
And what is your cost of capital? So where do you get your funds from to then, I don't know what the right word is, lend to these SMBs and these e-commerce providers?
Yeah. So, in starting a software company in the fintech space, it's been a unique challenge. We don't just raise equity dollars, right? The traditional,
That's
go to VCs.
Kind of what I want to know. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So we've raised VC dollars.
You did.
And, we're well financed to go build our business and our software and our go-to-market approach. But we've also had to go raise credit dollars. So that was a whole new world to me. And, we've got a great team here on our head of capital markets is a guy with 40 years of Wall Street experience who's been nothing but credit markets. Right. And so he's been a tremendous asset in doing that for us. And so we work with private equity groups who are essentially giving us, lines of credit that we then use to deploy with these merchants. And we then manage, to a set of covenants and terms with them in terms of the return and the turnover. And so, we essentially have two separate lines of capital. One is for building the business, and one is for financing operations for our clients.
So this is where things get really interesting to me, right? And I want to come back to the cost of capital too. I understand the private equity angle here. You're raising money and saying we're going to use that money to then build our business, the business side of the business, writing the software, doing all that stuff, right. Hiring a sales team. But the money that we lend out is going to be money that we get from private equity that's looking around and going, I can make 8% over the next 50 years on average in the stock market, or I'm making up a number. Yeah. I can make 12% a year lending to e-commerce people who are trying to better manage their cash flow and the relationship between their balance sheet and their income statement. So I'm happy to make that trade, right? Because that's all it is. It's just it's a trade, right? But do you ever think of the same thing as well? This is something that's so interesting to me. You're sitting there, and let me give you the context. I used to think about this with Amazon, right? Amazon runs this business called AWS. So if you're a startup, you can use their back-end services, right? AWS is pretty amazing. It makes starting a company 1,000 times easier than it used to be. But Amazon can see, like, if you need another S3 because you're just signing up for it, they know, they have hints that your business is growing really fast. And they actually have a whole thing, AWS for startups, and they kind of run a quasi-investment business as well. You kind of have access to a lot of similar data. Like, if I borrow 200 grand from you and then I don't ever need to borrow from you again, well, something radical has changed in my business. Either I'm out of business or I'm growing so fast that maybe Amazon is going to buy me. And you said, like, you're not a VC, but you're seeing all this stuff happen. Do you ever think, hey, maybe we should also be strategic about investing in some of these businesses as well? Not, particularly after we lend and we get our capital return, we lend and then get our capital return, and then we don't lend anymore, but they keep growing. Do you know what I mean? Do you see that as an opportunity as well? You're not interested.
It's not that I'm not interested. It's that, to build a business, you have to focus.
Yep.
And, I think longer term, there is an opportunity, to go in and look at investments or could we, develop, VC relationships or, in relationships with people who want to, and, be investors in e-commerce businesses and act as a referral agent. Right. Right now, we're still early stage and we're still building and honing our product, right. Honing our go-to-market. And, my objective is to get this business to a place where, we can take those additional risks. But, if you expand your area of focus too soon, then you may not succeed in any area, right?
Fair
so,
enough.
I think we're still in that stage of the business where our focus really needs to be on this working capital turnover. And then over time, right, we might expand that into, a broader range of financial services. I think that would just be a natural organic evolution of the business. But for right now, we're really focused on solving the working capital problem. To your point around, what happens to the business if they're not borrowing from us, we really think of it in two ways. At Shipping Easy, we saw this all the time. We actually had a free program, a free version of our app if you were what we call the starter, right? Less than 50 shipments a month. And when we looked at churn, right, we saw churn happen for two reasons. One, in Shipping Easy, it was infant mortality, right? It's just the unfortunate nature of starting a business. It's a really hard thing to do. And a lot of them, unfortunately, just don't make
mortality on the startup side, not on the infant side.
Yeah.
Okay, just want to be clear.
On the startup side, yes. On the startup side. Maybe not a good metaphor.
I just got nervous that babies were dying and people had a business about it. I was like, okay. Okay.
And then, the other side at Shipping Easy, right, they'd outgrow us. They would grow into a true ERP system, right, where they would need those tools. Onramp, we see the same thing, right? We're not working with the starters at Onramp because they just don't have enough velocity yet. But what we do see is that somewhere between 5 and 20 million in top line revenue, a business is forced to hire a CFO or a head of finance.
Too complicated after that.
And that person, it might take them 6 months to a year to really get all the books and financials and everything cleaned up and through an audit. But that person has been paid to do what Onramp does, which is to go to a bank and find a cost of capital, right, and get a line of credit and to optimize when to draw and repay. Prior to that person being there, that's what Onramp's doing, right? We're actually helping build that discipline around how you think about working capital and how it positions within your capital stack in the business.
So do you offer analytics to your customers as well? Do you know what I'm saying? Because you're building your own analytics. You're doing your own analysis. You got this guy that was doing credit on Wall Street for 4 decades, right? So you know how this works. You must have internal tools. But even for your starter teams, your starter guys and gals, right, that just don't have enough money yet. But if you could get them to a point where they can look at the analytics and say, hey, you know what? I think we're ready now for on-ramp services because we've hit whatever threshold is that you've determined is real. Do you do that too?
Not yet. That is on our roadmap. Certainly something we want to do. And yes, with the data we have, right, the ability to go position, some streamlined analytics tools to the merchants to really help them kind of how their business is performing. What's my best product? What's my worst? Which products are growing the fastest? Do I see margin erosion? All that kind of stuff that we're looking at internally. Those are things that we want to turn around and make merchant facing. We haven't done that yet, but I think that's probably something we'll be doing early next year. Because we do think it should help the merchant better run their business. And then it might be a set of tools that for the merchants we can't say yes to today could really help them, hone their business and get to a point where we can be of value to them.
So in the last, who knows, I don't even know how to measure this anymore, 20 years, 25 years. I mean, interest rates globally have just been either low or zero nominally. Yeah, real interest rates have been even lower. But with a little bit of an inflation scare at the sort of middle to the beginning of this year, you see the Fed starting to raise rates, right? So the Fed path obviously is very important in determining not just short-term rates, but longer-term rates too, and just the way the yield curve looks, right? How does that impact the way you think about this business? Or is your lending so short-term, right? You said 90 days, 180 days, that you're not that concerned about that?
Well, we're certainly concerned about it. I don't think that we have... I think we have the room to absorb some of that. And then because our lending is short term, look, if the Fed raises, if they pull a Saturday night special, Paul Volcker again, and take rates to 20%, great, we'll have a short term impact. But then we will have, we will just have to reprice, right? And we will just have to pass that in. And because the note's going to close in 90 days, we know that, 91 days from now, we will have solved for that problem with the next advance being just priced differently. That works to our advantage. By the way, I don't think we'll have a Volcker special. We have $300 trillion in more debt than we did back then, and the government would collapse. But I certainly remember what they did back in the early 80s to fix that problem, right? And I think we're in unfortunately, we're in a similar position again now. It's going to take some distasteful medicine, if you will, to correct for.
Squeeze some froth out of the market and also out of the economy.
Yeah.
When you nobody operates in a vacuum, right? And the e-commerce ecosystem just keeps getting more complicated and more complex and more partners in it every day. Do you look at some of the aggregators, like the most famous one, like Thrasio, right? Who goes out and tries to buy businesses and then aggregate them? Are they also a channel for lending as well? Or are those businesses too, what's the right word, mature to care about the products that a company like Onramp is offering? And do you work together with them as well, thinking like, hey, maybe they know some companies that need do you know what I mean? Like, how does all that work from a partnership perspective?
So, Thrasio and those guys are interesting, right? I think they raised $12 billion in 2021. And, which I think allows them to buy kind of 1% to 2% of the US e-commerce market. So it still doesn't make a dent. So I don't view them as, kind of an existential threat to our ability to go find customers. I will say, look, I think it's great that there are these aggregators out there that give the small business owner an opportunity to find an exit. What I dislike about them is that the multiple, they have an adjusted EBITDA number, if you will, that they kind of look at. And if I understand correctly, they're kind of offering you somewhere between 80 and 150% of your annual adjusted EBITDA number. And I think that's just far too low. And I think, one of the reasons merchants have taken that is that because financial tools like Onramp haven't been there, and these guys have had this cash conversion cycle problem, that they look at that and say, man, I have not paid myself in 2 years. My accountant tells me I've got a business that should be ginning off $100,000 a year in profit to me, but I can't get it out. And this guy's willing to give me 100, 150. And I'm just going to go say, great, take the business. I'm going to take a nice long vacation with the family and then go figure out what's next for me. Whereas what I'd like to see these guys say is, hold on, with Onramp, I can't get that 100 out because they're taking a bit of it, but I'm getting 90 out. And now if somebody's offering me 150, well, screw that. I'm going to earn 180 in 2 years if I don't grow the business. So I'd like to see those guys continue. I'd like to see the Thrasios continuing to acquire these companies, but I'd like the merchant to be able to sit in a place that says, hold on, I'm not making this decision out of a sense of desperation or just, exhaustion. I'm actually doing it based on I'm now running my business in a more sophisticated way that gives me a broader set of choices. And then I'm going to accept what is a viable offer versus just, any kind of boat in a storm, if you will.
Yeah, I get it. I have my own view on what the aggregators are doing. If you pay somebody, if you're like quietly evaluating their business at 11 times revenues and paying them 4 times revenues, it feels a little problematic to me. And I'd rather see somebody come in and, like you said, let's lend them money. Maybe the rates are a little bit high, but to be fair, Michael Milken basically built his entire career around this idea of you'll never be able to borrow money to build MCI, but I can fund you because I know that we need another phone company and what you're going to build, I can fund because you can afford the 12% or 13% interest. And this was the whole idea behind junk bonds. And I'm not making the equivalency between Onramp and a junk bond, but to be fair, is it really that far away? Because you're doing the same thing. You're basically going, we can fund your thing. We can help you grow, but a bank's never going to lend you money at these rates. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, the banks don't know how to do it. They can't move fast enough. They don't move at the pace of e-commerce. Right. So, again, you have to get to the point where you have that VP finance CFO on your team and a few e-commerce businesses start with that person on the team, and that person might just go straight to a bank because they already have everything dialed in. But the vast majority don't, right? That sophistication is they're forced to learn it as the business gets to a certain size of revenue. Just like, it didn't take much of a sophisticated process to go run a shipping operation out of a garage or 1,000 square foot warehouse. But when you got to the point where I need 10,000 square feet, you don't pick one item at a time anymore, right? Now you have a pick list, right? And you're going off and processing 100 orders, and then you're coming back and you're boxing 100 orders, and then you're labeling 100 orders so that it's just a more efficient process. And as part of that, right, you probably hire somebody who knows what they're doing, and they're coming in saying, hey, you can't use this software anymore. It's time for a better tool. And so, yeah, I mean, that's where we fit, right? We're providing capital, or I think it's a very fair price, to people that are, to businesses that are harder to underwrite at this stage of their business, that have inherently a lot more risk, right, and volatility in sales. And it's our job to then, help provide some discipline around how they think about spend and think about repayment. But then also to structure a product that, because of the way we bill, if your business slows down, your payments slow down, right? So we're not hey, you have to, on that 100,000, you have to pay $33,000 at the end of each month, right? We're not a 30-day payment term. What we are is a percentage of sales, and we actually collect upon deposit. So we know that sometimes deposits are delayed. And so if your deposit's delayed, your payment's delayed. We're fully aligned in that regard. And then when the deposits come good, then, we expect to get our share of that based on the terms that we set up front. And in doing so, right, then we're really aligned with, the ebb and flow of a merchant's business, so that we're really helping it. And then, Christmas is coming, right? It sounds crazy to say it. It's August and 102 degrees outside right now, but our merchants are gearing up, right? They're putting those inventory orders in right now. And the beauty of that, right, is we can see that coming. Now, we also have some merchants who have no Christmas lift. And so we're not giving them the benefit of a Christmas lift, loan right now, because that's not going to show up for them. They might be, a June spike, right? And so those guys, when February hits, right, we're going to be, gearing up for those guys. Whereas the Christmas team, right, those guys were bringing those numbers down because it's now a slower time of the year. And so we're helping optimize.
Do you look at other kind of financial services products as well? In other words, you talked before about focus, and I always wonder, like, if you're in this business and you're seeing all this data, what else can you do? It's early days, right, for OnRamp. So I understand this idea of focusing, but are there other financial services products you can offer your merchants as well, like insurance, like things that they'll need to pay for, that they can pay for with a little bit of the money that you offer them? Do you know what I mean? Or is that still outside the scope of things that you really want to get involved in today?
I think it's outside of what we want to get involved in today. It's certainly part of what we want to get involved in longer term, right? That we will be a broader financial solutions provider to the merchant, and probably very likely a broader product provider to the merchant. But today, the focus is the working capital piece, and the nice thing about that, right, is money's fungible. So if I'm financing your working capital, great. Do you need insurance? Well, there are people out there who do that. What I keep looking for opportunities, and we did it at Shipping Easy, and we're doing it on OnRamp. The opportunity I'm looking for is, how do we go purpose build a product that addresses a specific need of the e-commerce merchant? So if you look at most of the competitors to OnRamp, especially the non-digital, MCA, merchant cash advance providers. A merchant cash advance has been around for hundreds of years, right? Like, this is not a new product. Lending is in the Old Testament, right? I'm not, crossing the chasm with this. But if you look at it, it's not a product built for e-commerce, right? It's a product that's evolved around retail or other business outlets that has been shoehorned into the e-commerce industry without really reflecting the realities of this industry. And what I did with OnRamp was really, in 2019, 2020, before I launched the company, I was actually loaning my own personal money to a number of different small business merchants that I knew. I had a developer friend who just basically gave me the ability to connect into a couple of stores and suck in data that I could then just drop into Excel and literally lend by hand, and track by hand everything that was going on, and then purpose built this turnover product exactly around how those merchants were turning over their capital, looking at their QuickBooks, looking at their cash flows, inventory turnover cycles, sales cycles, that sort of thing. And then looked at how that data would reflect those things so that we could go deliver a product that truly is custom for e-commerce. Now, is it a loan? Yes. Is it, is that been around for a long time? Yes. The way we deploy, collect, track, and recycle, is unique in the way we price, right? In fact, I don't think we've yet to see a competitor who prices the way we do. And, when we were negotiating credit terms with the different private equity groups out there, one of the things that we were told was that we really had a novel approach to this. Cool. That was something they hadn't seen before in pricing, and that they actually felt from a regulatory perspective was far more aligned with kind of the ambitions of the regulators in terms of the ability for that merchant to reduce their fee based on accelerated repayment.
Got it. Can we talk a little bit about e-commerce in general, since you're so involved in it and you've been involved in it for quite some time? What percentage, again, you're old enough to remember as Amazon was growing, just this idea that e-commerce was going to take over stores. Malls were just going to end up being ghost towns. No one was ever going to leave their house to shop, and they would just like think that they need more toilet paper and it would show up at their house. We know this isn't true anymore. Do you have some idea about like what percentage of retail sales in the US are e-commerce? And also like when you look at the e-commerce marketplace, like the whole idea of this show is to just learn, like we don't think it's solved yet. Right? We think marketplaces are there, but like that's inning one for the way that e-commerce should look. When you step back and look at it, particularly, and I'm curious about this percentage to start with, how would you evaluate like what the state of it is, what the status of it is, and where you think it's going to go? Is that fair? Do you know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. No, I definitely have an opinion on this. Going all the way back to the malls, actually. So, look, I think e-commerce in the U.S. and by the way, we're very U.S. centric right now, right? We're early stage. We're gonna win in this market before we figure out global markets. And I hope that that we're successful enough that we get to go solve this at a global level as well. But for right now, we're U.S. focused. So I'm going to keep my response here on the U.S. market. I think the U.S. market is running about 17.5% of all retail is e-commerce, excluding like ticket and airline sales, right? So just let's talk about traditional physical retail. COVID we thought might have, essentially stair-stepped that up. But what it really did, it was the Campbell soup problem, right? It's a non-perishable item. You gave a coupon, and so all you did was just pull a whole bunch of sales forward. And then next quarter, when the coupon was gone, sales collapsed. Right. And so we're seeing that right now, right? We're back on the growth curve that we would have projected for 2019,
right? Like, sorry to interrupt you, but like, if the stock price is any indication, if the Shopify stock price is any indication, and Amazon the same way, it went all the way up until like 2020. Now it's like right back down. And if you could just draw a straight line like this, it's like this never happened.
Right back where exactly. Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
And so, it's interesting, like, really in the thing about forecasting and everything else, how much of the COVID era you kind of just have to throw away and say, hey, look, let's just take 2019, carry it forward. And that's where you're kind of looking at. So, look, I think e-commerce has a tremendous amount of room to grow. One of the things that always struck me as incredibly strange, and just a massive failure on the part of traditional retailers. Amazon, 7 years ago announced they were going to have a warehouse. They wanted warehouses within 20 miles of 95% of the U.S. population.
Everybody's house, basically.
Right. But guess who already had that? Simon Malls.
Yeah, I know. Simon.
Right. And guess what?
You don't want to talk to me about Simon Malls, but please go ahead. Yeah, because
those
at
guys
the intersection of every highway in every town and in every city and in every state in America, whether it was, I don't know what the highways are in Texas, but like in Connecticut, where there was 95 crossing 87 in New York, there was a Simon Mall there. Sorry, go ahead. They were everywhere and just didn't get it.
Everywhere. And those guys had the opportunity to, and I don't know, the technology and infrastructure required was going to be a big challenge, right? But you had the world's best catalog at every one of your malls
already.
And people within a 20-mile drive, if you could have just figured out how to aggregate that inventory across PacSun and Oakley and
everybody already shopped there, so they knew you and trusted you.
Right. And then said, look, we're gonna drive orders to Nordstrom, and we'll either then have the person deliver, or the customer can just drive in and pick up curbside, right? Which COVID proved we could deploy that very, very quickly. Those guys, had a great chance to beat Amazon at their own game 20 years ago. And it's, it's unfortunate they didn't. Now, I don't think physical retail ever goes away.
Never.
Right? People want to touch. There's a tactile thing to it.
Social. They want to.
There's just
shop
a browsing.
With other people.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Right. And so, I think that's always going to be a part of it. I do think it's very exciting to see like the Bonobos guys and Warby Parker, right, who have taken this really cool retail and e-commerce approach and put them together in a new way. I think grocery, right, a huge part of e-commerce growth is going to come from grocery, and what Amazon's done with Whole Foods is incredibly interesting. The pharmacy world, right? What they just did.
We don't live in the States, right? But of course, we watch the news, and I saw Amazon buy Whole Foods. I've never been into a Whole Foods. That's how long I've been out of the United States, right? What are they going to do with it? Or you've already commented, like, what are they going to do that's going to make the Whole Foods experience so much better or Amazonified? Do you know what I mean? Like, what's the plan there?
I can't speak to the plan. I will say Whole Foods is headquartered here in Austin, right?
Yeah.
So it's an it's a marquee Austin brand like a Dell. There was, I think, a lot of turmoil early in the purchase with a lot of the grocery employees, right? Because Whole Foods had a far different culture than Amazon.
He says non-ironically.
Yeah, but they've managed to bridge it. It's now if like as this microphone, right? We tried a different set of microphones. They didn't work for some podcasts before, so we returned it. And the Amazon return is, hey, if you just drive it to the Whole Foods, they'll just take it, right? I mean, that was dead simple, easy, right? We didn't have to rebox it. We could take all that stuff into the Whole Foods, and we had a big box of stuff. They're like, scan. Okay, going back to your credit card. Are you hungry? Because here's the grocery store. And so I think that's been. Yeah, exactly. That's been incredibly interesting to watch. It's an interesting way for Amazon to drive foot traffic. It gives them the ability, right, to then drive their entry into the grocery world. Speaking of grocery, the other probably most innovative grocery chain in America is HEB, which is headquartered in San Antonio.
What's HEB?
Now it's it's a grocery store chain like a Safeway or a Kroger or whatnot. They're only 300 stores, but they are the most profitable per store grocery chain and the most innovative in the U.S. And so and they actually have a different chain called Central Market that competes with Whole Foods, just under a different brand. And you see a lot of interesting things what they're doing in grocery delivery. They bought a company called Favor, which was one of the kind of Instacart players, right? Because they wanted to make sure they had that toehold. And so I think, what we see in Texas, right, is a lot of the innovation happening in the grocery world. Now the player that's got to figure this out is Walmart, because Walmart, unbeknownst to most people, is actually a massive grocery store. It's not just the dry goods, right? They've moved in the grocery space 15, 20 years ago in a real hard way, and they just haven't caught up to grocery delivery yet.
So Walmart, again, super interesting. And I actually, on one of my other shows, I spoke to a woman from India who was actually in Silicon Valley when Walmart really started to build Walmart.com. And then obviously I believe that they acquired a company called Jet for like $4 billion to try to really understand how that works. And I feel like Walmart's coming on strong. Yeah. But again, it's in the same vein as Amazon. But again, to get back to the Simon Malls thing, Walmart as well, their stores are warehouses, to be fair. Right. And the Sam's wholesale, like
Sam's Club
was the Sam's Club. Sorry, same thing, right? They should be killing this, and I do have a feeling, though, the Waltons they're very deliberate about the way they behave, and they're some of the wealthiest people in the United States, but in the world as well. But I get the feeling that like they're just slowly but surely and deliberately and methodically building their online business as well, and at some point they're going to end up being a lot bigger part of e-commerce than they are today. What do you think?
I would completely agree. I think they face some significant challenges. From the e-commerce business owners that I speak to that either have sold on Walmart, sell on Walmart, or have been unable to get on Walmart. A lot of the challenges have been around brand registry. What Amazon does with the brand registry to allow you to create your own brand and protect that brand from other people coming in to sell your branded products is really powerful. And Walmart's failing there. Maybe it's not fair to say
they haven't built that properly.
They're still
yet.
trying to go build the tools. Yeah, it's a difficult tool to build, right? And it's difficult to enforce. And so it's not something you just go, turn on a piece of software and it's solved for you. And so they're trying to go learn that. I think they've been very methodical in how they bring on new merchants, right? Their merchant catalog, I think they're now over 100,000. But Amazon, I think, signs up, 1 million a year. Now, most of those never sell a product. So, different thing. But, I think Walmart to get there. Walmart is, now working with some other groups to make sure that they can essentially convert their delivery warehouses into a competitor to FBA, which I think is incredibly important.
Are we going to get FBW?
Yeah, I think so. And it would make sense, right? I mean, Walmart's got they are an amazing logistics organization. In terms of the things that they can do, right, and the things that they do to help, in natural disasters here in the U.S. and hurricanes and stuff like that, where Walmart trucks are rolling in with water and diapers and all that kind of stuff when communities have been wiped out. It's incredible. So immense respect for what they've built, but they've got a ways to go in what they're building in the e-commerce world. Was it Mark Lohr, who was the CEO of Jet.com, right? Was in there. I don't know if I know he stayed for a while. I don't know if he's still there or not.
It was, I think it was a $4 billion sale. And he was like, I've only been at this for like 16 months or something. Yeah.
2 years.
It wasn't that long. He was like, 4 billion, yours. Where's my office again? I'll be back from the Bahamas in about 6 weeks. Just tell me where I sit. In Arkansas, just tell me where.
Exactly. So, look, they should be a viable marketplace. I think they will. Amazon, back to the mall thing, Amazon did announce that they're trying to cut it, or maybe they cut a deal with the Simon guys recently to try to start extending that product catalog from the mall for their same day delivery, right? Because the products are there. And if I want a pair of sunglasses that's sitting at the Oakley store in the mall, boom, there's this Amazon Flex truck, right? That's going to go just swing by, pick it up, drop it off at my house. And okay, great. I mean, I don't want to go to the mall. I know that I'm not alone in that, but I'm unusual in that, right?
You're not the mall demo. But what do you think?
Exactly.
Do you really think, and Austin is actually maybe the perfect place to test this, right? Because it's a city, but it's not a gigantic, it's not Manhattan, right? It's not LA, which is different than Manhattan as well. But it's like, do you really want stuff in 15 minutes often enough to make 15-minute delivery important?
Okay, so I'm handy around the house, and when I bought a Tesla, I installed my own in-home wall charger, right? Because I like to do that kind of stuff. And for the life of me, I know that anytime I'm going to do a project, right, I'm going to build something, it's going to turn into 16 trips to the freaking Home Depot. And so in that world, yes, because I'm tired of getting in the car and driving to the Home Depot and all that stuff. But for most of this stuff, no, right? Like it's same day, next day, 2 days. My approach to e-commerce is once I have a brand that I like, and I'll give an example. I won't use their name, but there's a brand of protein that I like. I've got a 15-year-old son who likes to lift weights. He uses it. They sell on Amazon and they sell on their site. If I go to Amazon, it's the same prices on their site, because if they raise the price on Amazon higher than their site, Amazon gets mad at you, right? They have policies against that. But the challenge here is that Amazon's charging a commission, and then there's the FBA fees. If I go to their website and buy direct, they actually charge me for shipping. And I'm like scratching my head saying, hold on, that shipping cost, I know how much it costs because I've run shipping companies, right? And I know the fulfillment work, right? But that more than offsets the commission you're paying Amazon. So if you would just not charge me shipping, I would actually not care if there was 2 days. If you want to say it's going to be a week, right? Great. Let it be a week. I'm ordering the stuff in advance. I don't care. I'd rather give you the money direct. But now what happens, right, is that they've optimized for Amazon, and I just don't feel I should be paying them for shipping. And I'll go to Amazon and I've already paid my Prime fee, so I'm going to get my free shipping, and it just becomes easy that way. So I'd like to see more merchants really think about, how they comply with Amazon while not disincentivizing, the e-commerce buyer to go to them direct, because I think a lot of Americans would like to go to the small business owner direct and feel like that their shopping is making a difference in that way. And yet so many people just kind of say, okay, great, we're going to let Amazon own it.
Yeah, and look, let's be fair. You said this a little bit offline, but let's say it online too, right? And I think you said a little bit at the beginning. I'm not nearly as libertarian as you when it comes to no, and I'm not joking about it either. Everyone has a right to believe what they believe. I believe that actually very strongly. But I will come down with you on this, and that is that I think that we're all freer if we're running our own businesses.
Yeah.
Because, and I do this all the time, right? So I live this. If I walk up to a new juice stand and there's a guy there in his 40s, I'm presuming he's not an employee. That's just my presumption, right or wrong.
Right.
Because if he wasn't the owner, or if she wasn't the owner, they would hire somebody who was 18 to do this, right?
Right.
This is what I'm thinking. But I always ask, are you the owner? Because I'm super happy to give the owner, even if the juice is not perfect, the $3.50 for the juice or the $3.99, because I know exactly where that money's going, rather than giving it to Juice Jumbo or whatever it says right next door. That's a chain that's, nationwide.
Right.
So I completely agree with you on this. But do you think, and what you're doing is trying to facilitate that as well, but when you look at the e-commerce market, are you concerned at all that you're just going to get like 5 gigantic marketplaces? Or do you believe what I believe, and that this whole thing is cyclical? And then as they get bigger and bigger, people are going to want to go smaller and smaller, partially for the reason that we just talked about, but also because they're very specific products that they want. And it's hard to find them in a place where discovery is so difficult. Does that make sense?
I mean, Amazon's won at the discovery game, right? That's why they're big. It's the world's #1 product search engine. And they've done a really good job of helping you find that product you're looking for and having the catalog to browse.
And maybe discovery is the wrong word, because you're right. They've spent a ton of money on search, right, and discovery. But I hate when I'm shopping in a physical store, right, and I'm like, I really want those shoes, and someone's like, you need 4 extra pairs of laces, and everyone who buys these shoes buys, like, don't bother me when I'm shopping, right? It's the recommendation engine part of it that I think that needs to get quieter, and smaller shops don't do that. That's what I mean. Like, do you see a way where big marketplaces kind of lose a little bit of leverage, or from your perspective, do you think that's just going to keep going on?
I think if you look at the arc of history, right, the big tech guys, Amazon, Walmart, right, eventually are going to get smacked down by the U.S. government, and some things are going to change in terms of just the market dominance they have from an antitrust perspective.
Interesting.
I also think the market will push that way as well. My goal with OnRamp, right, is just to increase the optionality, right? It's not that everybody should be an e-commerce business owner. It's that if that's what you want to pursue, let's give you the tools to do that and make it as efficient and easy as possible for those that want to do so. But not everybody should. And to your point, right, I want everybody to have the choices. They get to make the choice they want and have choices available to them, so they can do what's best for them in their lives and pursue their passions. In terms of, just the marketplace dominance, I think there's always going to be a place for it. But I do think that, Shopify, I think and I'm not saying this from any inside knowledge. I think eventually Shopify, BigCommerce, right, guys that have these carts with tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands or more merchants are going to want to continue to work on discoverability. How are they going to go help those merchants sell more and find more customers and really make that a more efficient experience? And in doing so, right, that they're going to help that small business owner in their way. And so I think that's going to happen. And I think that, with what we see the U.S. government having done to railroads back in the 1880s and oil in the 1910s, right, that there is going to be I think a concerted effort to really look at tech differently. And in my mind, I think that's probably a necessary thing because it's just I think it's the diversification is a good thing, and there needs to be that. So I don't think the markets, the Amazons dominate forever, but I also think they play an important place. And I think that, merchants who could look at Amazon and say, I'm going to, customers are going to find me here. But if I do a good job, there's a good chance customers will start coming to my site. Regardless. And in doing so, then how do I make my site the place that they buy from in the future so that I develop that direct relationship, but then still have that Amazon relationship to help with my, me finding new customers. And then, how do I make that a really symbiotic and powerful relationship?
Okay. I think that's a great way to end. Martin, is that cool? Like, this was so great. I could go on forever, but I just want to say thank you.
That's completely cool. No problem. Perfect.
Okay.
Michael, it's been great.
Yeah, give me a second. Eric Youngstrom, founder and CEO at OnRamp Funds. That was really superior. Thank you so much for doing that.
Michael and Martin, thank you for having me. It's been great. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Awesome. Great.